Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 5 of Cohort. I am Megan Torrance, and I am excited to have us here watching the weather reports come in from all over the United States and all over the world as we have folks signing in and getting ready for another week of Cohort. I don't know about you, but I surf all of the channels in the Cohort Slack, and it's pretty awesome to see teams getting started, figuring things out, making progress. And I know at this point, some of you are feeling like, gosh, we can't even get a meeting together, or all we've done is get together and figured out how much we don't yet know. That's exactly where you should be right now. That's exactly what happens in this early stage of the projects where you're starting to figure things out. And what I'm also seeing in the Slack teams is that shift over from the who are we, what are we about, what do we know, when are we going to get together, and how are we going to work, to let's start working and getting some stuff done. And so that is super, super excited. So I'm going to share my screen and get us rocking and rolling here for the 5th week of xAPI Learning Cohort. We've got a lot going on and real status updates this week and a fantastic presentation session that I am actually pretty geeked to have the opportunity to bring to you. So we are recording this session today. So if you are on the mailing list and getting regular emails every week from us, you will get the recording of this, the PowerPoint decks from this, plus additional resources. So there's tons of value coming your way via email if you can't catch this in real time. So like I said, this is week 5 of 12. xAPI cohort this semester alone is almost 800 strong. So we expect to cross that 800 mark in just a bit. We haven't hit over 800 for a cohort since the fall of 2020, when everybody was home and still wasn't sure quite what it was they were going to be working on with the pandemic. So we've got lots of folks in now, and that's really, really exciting. And lots of newcomers. So there's a lot of energy, and I'm really excited about this. My name, as we mentioned, was Megan Torrance, and I am assisted today by Jamie Washington, as well as on the Ethernet and in your email box by Jamie Washington, who helps make all of this seem incredibly smooth and easy to pull off, and by Matt Cleaver in the Slack channel, helping out wherever possible as people get stuck. The cool thing, though, is that the community helps out. So if you look, you're seeing folks like Joan Davis and Colin Hayes and Brian Floyd and Brian Duck and Martin Kloop, like all these people who are helping out and answering questions. And the learning geek in me gets super excited when we realize that what we've created together, me and you and all of 4,000 or some odd of us since the fall of 2015, is a learning community that is self-sustaining, a community of practice and a community of experimentation that is incredible and exciting. To that end, it is never too late to join Cohort. And so we're actually in a moment going to talk about what is Cohort, in case this is your first time here. What we've tried to do is make this a welcoming experience for people to come in and learn and focus the relevant cognitive load on learning about xAPI, not about learning about xAPI Cohort. This week, we're talking about how do I choose a learning record store and how do I make the most of it? So a lot of times for your cohort projects, if you're doing a project, for your cohort projects, you may be using a free trial or StormCloud or something that is nearby and handy. But when your organization starts to use xAPI, you'll want to use something a little bit more thoughtful, right? You're going to make some intentional and thoughtful choices. And then once you've made those intentional and thoughtful choices, make the most out of it. And so Ryan Sachs and Dave Newbold from Learning Pool are going to come and talk to us a bit about that. So I'm pretty excited. Once again, as always, unless we have stated otherwise, all of our cohort projects are considered to be operating under the Apache 2.0 license, which basically means everybody's offering their stuff for free. We're giving it our best shot. Don't sue each other for bad ideas. Those of you who are presenting a team update and going to be coming off of mute and doing that today. We want to make sure that you take a little bit of time while I'm doing this preamble to do a little bit of tech check. So check your AirMeet settings in the upper right-hand corner. You'll have a little gear. It says settings. That's where you're going. Go to the microphone at least and make sure that your microphone is picking up the microphone you want it to pick up. And check your camera as well. Save those settings. And then when it comes time, after Ryan and Dave present, it comes time to do your team updates, and you're your designated team updater. Go ahead and raise your hand. Jamie will grab you, and your tech check will be already pre-done. If only we had the ability through xAPI to know whether or not your settings were checked in advance. We'd just check the LRS. But someday we'll get there. Okay, so I promised a little bit about what is the xAPI cohort, because people are joining all of the time. In fact, as you think about your professional development, actually a piece I'm writing for the Learning Guild maybe this week, it's due next week, is really building that professional network. And one of the things that you can do to help give to your network is to sign your friends up. Don't sign them up. Invite them to sign up. So here's what to do if you're brand new. xAPI cohort. It's free. It's virtual. It's vendor neutral, which means you can expect not to be sold to. However, it's vendor supported, which means if you need help, very often the people who can help you are vendors. And the other thing is vendors often provide extended free trials and extended support or free learning opportunities through cohort to cohort members, because it's important for the entire industry to make sure that we build that adoption. This is a 12-week learning by doing project-based team learning experience and community. So it's 12-week long. We're in week 5, learning by doing project-based. So you can hop in and do a project team. That happens in Slack and GitHub, and usually a bunch of meetings, maybe like once a week, depends on the group. And then we come here for a structured weekly web session where we get team updates. You get to find out what everybody's doing, and some learning content. And then we follow all that up with an email to make sure that you're not missing a thing. So this week in our curriculum, we are starting the build and tune the ecosystem part of the cohort curriculum. We start off with what is it and how do I do it? So if you're just joining us, there are several weeks of what is xAPI and how do I send data. This week starts our what's my ecosystem for doing something with all this data? I have learning record stores. We're going to talk about learning analytics. We're going to talk about a variety of just resources for organizing and planning your data collection. And we're going to end this section, although one could think we would start this section with data ethics from Stella Lee, where we try not to repeat sessions one for one every cohort. Stella's session last cohort in fall of 2021 on data ethics was so outstanding that I invited her back again. So today, how do I choose an LRS and make the most of it? In the project teams in Slack, we are getting right started with that design, build, get, help, test, and repeat cycles that we have of iterations as we're going. We will soon, by the end of March, be in demo time. So we've got 2 weeks of real live case studies of xAPI in action, right? So all of this up at the top is theory and structure and learning about. And then we have 2 weeks of seeing it in action. I'm super excited because both Amy and Khalid are cohort members. And so you get to there's an extra, there's an extra awesomeness about seeing cohort folks who are doing it out in the real world and able to report back to us, right? What we're doing out there. And then we get to see your demos, which we know are demos of projects that were created during learning. So they're not going to be finished. They're not going to be fancy, but they will be full of learning. So plan to be hit up by me to schedule a time for project team demos because we want to see what you've got going on. And then I keep promising a date and I don't have one yet. xAPI party and a couple of other opportunities I'm working on for sharing your project team's work on a bigger stage. So xAPI Party is a free day-long conference about xAPI. It serves kind of as a capstone to the xAPI cohort, but also it's its own thing. So there's a Venn diagram between Party and cohort. At Party, all of the cohort teams have an opportunity to have a 20 or 45-minute sharing session about their projects. So it's kind of a cool opportunity to get some airtime for your work. And I'm all about making sure that cohort team members get the visibility and the publicity and the appreciation and the adulation for all of the work that you're doing, because that's some pretty darn cool stuff. So I'm going to stop talking. I would love to invite to the cohort stage Ryan Sachs and Dave Newbold from Learning Pool. Learning Pool are the folks who bring you the Learning Locker LRS and a couple of other cool tools. But they're going to talk to us about how do I choose an LRS? And then once I've done that, how do I make the most out of it? So I'm going to stop my screen sharing and I'm going to let them turn on theirs. And thank you, guys. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. I appreciate the opportunity. And Jamie and everyone else in the cohort, it's been great. We've been looking forward to this for a number of weeks. So excited to have some time today to speak more about Learning Locker and really address these issues agnostically about how organizations may look to bring in an LRS for the first time. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. And Dave, if you can just let me know when you can see it, that'd be great. It should be live right now.
It's working right now.
Okay, perfect. So looking forward to going through the session and then hearing all the updates from you on the teams as well. And just for some quick introductions, my name is Ryan Sachs. I'm with the sales organization at Learning Pool. Learning Pool is the maker and hoster for Learning Locker LRS, or Learning Locker Data Cloud. And I'm joined by my colleague, Dave. Dave, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, guys. Yeah, so I'm Dave. I'm a solutions architect here at Learning Pool. So I act as a middleman very often between our commercial teams and our product and development teams to make sure that we can really provide the right solution to the problems that our customers face.
Appreciate it. So the intent, of course, is to keep this focused high level on an LRS. If you see any Learning Pool logos beyond this, I apologize, or we may call it out specifically. And after a handful of slides, we're actually going to jump into the platform so we can start to speak about some of these advantages beyond just the conceptual, but what it actually looks like as well. So let's go ahead and get started. And as much as I love rigatoni bolognese and relying on intuition and experience that I think we all build better careers, obviously the focus here is trusting the data and focusing on that actionable intelligence that we get from our learning applications, whether it's one system or the consolidation or aggregation of many, and that intent of really future-proofing how that data comes in so that we can start on that recipe. And in this case, the xAPI recipe, and Peter and Brian and some of the other speakers in the past have spoken about this too. So to get started, first looking at how to go through an LRS evaluation, potentially a couple of things that you should ask yourselves. You can ask the vendors that you might be working with, and even some expectations in terms of questions that might be asked back to you. From there, we'll jump into some of those business challenges that I think we're trying to address with bringing in a new application. Of course, making the most of it, and then wrapping up with the storytelling and what you can do from there. So beyond just not losing the narrative in the numbers, it's really trying to focus that narrative on the big picture, the data itself. xAPI can track a lot. I've been exposed to it now for a number of years, and I'm not an architect or a scientist, and so I try to think holistically about what we're solving for. And I think that helps kind of set the stage and keeps everyone focused on potentially phase one and phase two. knowing that this, of course, evolves over time. And so as you start out this journey or your evaluations, it's really important to really consider what is that goal. And you may have many, but early on, it might be important to start on a few. Some things to take into consideration are internally at your organization, the resources and the strategic buy-in that you have. I think honestly, being able to align a data project like this back to the broader organizational initiatives, even outside of L&D, can really have significant implications on how successful that becomes. And if you're able to, maybe the LRS can be used to help improve revenue in some aspect, or it's going to help the organization grow into a new market. Or from a compliance standpoint, I think a common use case is how this is used to reduce risk. Another consideration is, well, who do we have on our team to support this? Because it might include bringing in multiple sources of data from multiple learning applications. There might be coding, like we've talked about in the past, from non-xAPI sources. This could also include the people and the capabilities from the vendor itself and their willingness to be consultative or provide services to help that data come in. And then the last piece is, do you have the right process and even the technology in place? And this also alludes to, once the data is in the LRS, is it going to continue to live there, or are we potentially sending it back out in the future? So as you think about those initial goals and focusing on that narrative that you're trying to develop, these are just a couple of examples, ones that I hear of often, and Dave as well, in terms of what people are trying to solve for. And so I broke out just, again, a handful of questions about where you might spend your efforts. It could be on going deeper into completions and time spent in specific learning activity. It could be focusing on overall performance of learners going through those learning experiences. It could be on engagement and the interaction of people within the organization. I honestly find more and more now that companies really, beyond mandatory compliance content, are really focused on how the users are interacting with the content, and they're a little bit less concerned with, was it completed? Or it could be on the content itself. That content could be homegrown and built in an authoring tool, or it could be from a partner as well. And I think going back to what I mentioned before, try to keep it simple. Focus on a small win. And at the end of the day, maybe you're just picking one of these topic areas to get started. It's still going to kind of start that process, and undoubtedly it will lead you to future considerations as well. I just wanted to bring up an example of an RFP that I've recently received for a multinational corporation looking to bring in a learning record store into their learning ecosystem for the first time. And I'll share this back out with Megan and the team so it can be distributed after the session. But a couple of questions I really liked that I highlighted throughout this were, again, thinking about the support model from the vendor, right? It's not all on you, or it can't be all on you to make a project like this successful. And so I think it's important to share the goals that you have with these organizations that you might be working with and get their feedback or even ideas on how they might help you achieve those goals. Taking small things into consideration in terms of, well, as I pull the data, or I potentially want to show the data that I have in our LRS to other stakeholders in the organization, does it need to be in real time? And you may not be thinking about this, but it takes into consideration the size and scope and how often the data metrics get pulled from the LRS that potentially get sent back out elsewhere. And then from a couple sessions ago, How do you handle non-xAPI sources? So just something to consider and maybe think about as you're starting an evaluation, doing your internal checklist, and then preparing maybe an RFP. It doesn't have to be this formal. It could just be questions that you send out or you prepare to ask during a conversation. So in a couple moments, I'm going to turn it over to Dave to walk through a few things, but I just wanted to reiterate the intent here of making informed decisions, because it's absolutely going to lead to the greatest outcome. And clearly the data here is designed to help us develop this story of what we're able to capture from learning activity. In some cases, you might be thinking, well, this is where I can show the ROI, right? This is maybe where I can prove that our partnership with third-party content provider XYZ, or bringing in this LXP or anything like this, might work. But honestly, sometimes the data that we get doesn't prove ROI. It creates a story, and we have to be prepared for that. At the end of the day, I think this ties back to training effectiveness, knowledge transfer internally throughout the organization, competencies, engagement, or employee feedback. I'm kind of curious here, and you can use your comment section. Where do you think you kind of fall on this chart here in terms of an analytics maturity model? I'm sure the intent is to start to move up that chain, right, into this more proactive or prescriptive stage, and potentially predictive. But I'd be really curious to kind of see, when I can see the screen again, where everyone kind of thinks they are today. And of course, there's two components, right? There's an external training factor too for organizations that are issuing customer training, partner training, as being able to capture what's happening in your application or applications and turning it back into actionable insights so that you can become the industry standard or redefine the industry standard if it's external learning. So I'm going to pause here for a second. And David, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll continue moving the slides as you're able.
Thanks, Ryan. So I think when we look at what our customers look for in an LRS, it's really looking at the reasons why. And we speak regularly to organizations who've heard the term LRS and don't really know why they want one, but think they should because the xAPI is exciting and it offers great opportunities. But really, it's making sure that you've got a tangible reason to need one. And outside the cohort, which is very experimental and very progressive, actually, what is the need at your organization? So typically, we see maybe 4 or 5 different sort of benefits or value propositions of an LRS, whether that be consolidating multiple learning platforms or sources of data. We see a lot for using xAPI to trigger something else happening. Maybe we're seeing a trend at the moment, looking at maybe to benchmark yourselves against your competitors or each other within your organization, measuring confidence and the impact that can have on performance, and even looking at the impact of learning on productivity and using the xAPI to maybe provide unique learning experiences for your learners. Normally, we can categorize the two types of stakeholders for organizations into 2. People who work directly or primarily in learning, and people who work directly or primarily in data. Now, I noticed on the cohort, there's some really cool people who overlap heavily and work in both, but that's probably the exception rather than the rule. And so the idea is, can you recognize why you need an LRS? Is it something as simple from a learning perspective that you just want somewhere where you can see your organization's users' activities? So you're not having to log into the likes of GetAbstract, LinkedIn Learning, Degreed, your LMS, and to find out people's information and what they've achieved. Is it, particularly for you learning designers or instructional designers on the call, Is it that you want to be able to access interaction data that you just can't get out of SCORM? And we see a lot of VR organizations now starting to realize the benefit of xAPI, and we see lots of gaming platform organizations starting to see the benefit of xAPI in standardizing all that data about the stuff that people are doing within those platforms. Or do you just want to become more mature as an L&D department and start to analyze the ROI on your learning tech, as Ryan alluded to earlier? Then from a data perspective, we see the trends that actually we've got all these learning platforms from that we've talked about before, but actually they all produce data in a different format. They provide it in a different way, and it's making it difficult for us to actually make any value out of it or understand it. So can we work with turning all of our data into xAPI, sending it into a learning record store and using that as the central source of truth to underpin the wider ecosystem that we have, and then potentially send that data out to our organization's BI tool so we can then combine that with other metrics such as cost, time spent, even, it could be anything performance metric wise. So as alluded to before, there's some key ways to get that data from the LRS. So a few weeks ago, we looked at getting that xAPI data into the learner record store. But once it's there, what do you do with it? And you guys wouldn't be the first customers that we potentially would have that get millions of records of data, and they're then just not sure what to do with it once they've got it. So it's worth, when you're looking to choose an LRS and planning on making the most of it, it's worth looking at the technology you already have in your organization, the data strategy, and making sure that the partner that you choose has the appropriate ways that your teams will be able to pull that data. And we use 3 different examples, which is very similar to the wider industry. Do you use APIs to pull that data along with ETL tools such as Zapier? Or do you have in-house capability to actually access those APIs and pull the data that you need and send it elsewhere? Some LRSs, such as ours, is hosted separately on its own server, and we can provide access directly to the database. So can you actually use your learner record stores database in conjunction with all the other data stores in your organization to feed your other services? But do you need data live, and do you need it to trigger something? In which case, many learner record stores have something called statement forwarding. And what that allows you to do is immediately forward an xAPI statement on somewhere else to trigger something to happen. So they're the 3 key things, and they're what we find the biggest challenge for our customers is we've got. I think we have customers with over 1 billion records. They don't know what to do with them once they've got them. So I'm going to quickly jump in and show the platforms that we have, just a few examples of some of those features live, just so it's a bit more exciting than looking at a slide. So I'm quickly going to ask Ryan to stop sharing his screen, and I will share mine. Great. Can I just check that sharing okay?
Yep.
Lovely. Thank you. So this is an example of our learning record store learning locker, and there's 2 systems I'm going to show you today just as an example of some of the features that you can look out for when finding a vendor. So first thing that you would expect to see is a live stream of all the statements coming through, and this is a small demo platform. In here we can see all of the statements coming through and all of the xAPI, the juicy xAPI metadata that sits within each statement. We'd anticipate some sort of query builder, so I can start to, so I'm only interested in my own activity, and the query builder will populate that automatically. I can also add additional things. So maybe I'm only interested in things that I have opened, for example. We would also expect the ability to create multiple clients within a learner record store. So you can separate out all your different sources of learning. So this example here has a number of clients for all the different sources that feed this demo platform. So everything from an authoring tool to a particular piece of content that's capturing the confidence of a learner as they go through their learning, to a simple LinkedIn learning store, your LXP, your LMS, and perhaps another example here. So the example here is something I'm working on with a virtual reality customer that we have. Within there, I would expect to be able to configure my key, my secret, and all sorts of different things in here to be able to receive that xAPI data. Another key feature that we have that's unique is often that we have, and that many other pieces have that can solve problems, is we have something called journeys. And the idea around journeys is they're able to solve some problems. And many learner record stores have features very similar in that perhaps I've got a series of activities, or I like to call them the golden thread of activities that I'm tracking learners through. And maybe those activities don't all exist in one place. So it's very, very difficult for me to track that progress. What Journeys allows you to do is create a series of waypoints, and this one's based entirely on LinkedIn, but it conversely could be in all of these. And I can check for statements telling me when a learner has completed a certain activity. So this one is a remote working program on LinkedIn Learning that isn't curated by LinkedIn, but I want my learners to do it. So I can set the waypoints for what they want to achieve. And then when complete, I can send a message somewhere. I can also store back in the system another xAPI statement to say, brilliant, they finished their journey. So now I can have journeys of journeys, and then it becomes a little bit like the movie Inception, but you can have as many complex journeys as you like. And we're starting to see a trend for something like Credly, so accreditation. So this is where a combination of statement forwarding and xAPI now automates sending data to something like Credly to accredit my learners automatically when they achieve something. Those statement forwards could be configured here. So this one's turned off for the time being, but once somebody completes that journey, it captures that statement and forwards it to Credly. And finally, when we look at all the stores we had earlier, there were many different stores there, and each of my users have different identifiers across each store. So what this allows me to do, the personas piece, which uses the model in the xAPI specification around defining who people are, it allows me to say, well, okay, I use a Krista here. She's got 3 accounts across our ecosystem. And unfortunately, she's got a different identifier across each. So I want to consolidate those into one persona. So no matter where she completes her learning, we know it's her. So these are the kind of features that I would expect organizations to look for, only if necessary, but in a learner record store partner. Now, when we look at providing value, and we look at some of those value propositions that Ryan pulled up earlier, and how can we quickly measure our success? What we find is that depending on the complexity of your requirement, depending on the volume of data, it can take a long time to recognize that value. And let's face it, some learner record stores aren't that cheap. So what we want to do is try and ensure that we recognize value quickly. So what we do is we can provide a link to your in-house BI tool. So maybe you use Power BI or Tableau, or maybe you don't have that. And so we can provide a BI tool of our own called Insights. But the idea is that it's agnostic. So the xAPI, its beauty is that it can push that data anywhere. But to realize that value, I need to identify one key problem I'm trying to solve, or one key piece of information I'm trying to find out, an answer to a hypothesis or a question. So this is now xAPI data feeding this platform, telling us how many logins we've had, how many unique, total completions, enrollments, something really simple that LMSs can do. But this is across multiple platforms for millions and millions of statements. Because it's an enterprise grade BI tool, we're now using xAPI, but to provide enterprise grade functionality. So things like something just as simple as adding trend lines, or separating out the types of content. And the nice thing about this tool, and many other BI tools out there, it's drillable. So I can drill down here. It's now using xAPI to make predictions. So if we think about our learning analytics maturity model, which is really difficult to say, we're now using xAPI to make predictions. So this xAPI completion and enrollments, we've now got an upper and a lower prediction over what might happen next. BI tools with artificial intelligence can start to explain anomalies. So this example here will load up the line graph, and it will identify where we have anomalies, where we have breakpoints in our trends. And if I select this anomaly, it will give me reasons why it thinks that might have happened. So that could be that a part of the organization is all logged in. Without clicking this, because it takes a while to load, the anomaly that it tells me here is, over this particular day, a subset of users all decided to enroll on an activity to practice a piece of content. So I can start to identify what's the value that xAPI brings to me I can get to quickly. And for you learning designers, in the instructional designers out there, that value could be something as simple as gathering people's confidence, or making sure that you can capture question level responses that you couldn't get to before. If ROI is a big part of this, this is actually taken from a live example that we did, was, okay, well, we know that the LMS can capture seat cost for face-to-face training. And we know over the pandemic that face-to-face training had to transition to online. So what is the impact of that financially? So using pure xAPI data, we now can see, well, 72% have now moved online in the last 2.5 years. We can see that even though 72% of people moved online, that was only 44% of the actual training cost by time. And it was only 20% of the cost for one particular course. We can separate it out for costs over location, and have user reports about particular courses and costs and various other things. So this is really important, that the xAPI now is serving the wider business, so not just L&D. So if you can get to a proof of concept that ring fences your first phase of delivery to something really simple like this, all of a sudden the wider business starts to provide buy-in, and you increase the perceived value of what you're doing.
Thanks, Dave. That's helpful. I'll go ahead and take back control. And Megan, just a quick check on time. Is it about 5 minutes or so, or do we have a little bit longer? Okay, well, we'll plan for 5 minutes.
Yep, take about 5 minutes. You're in good shape. Sorry,
Okay.
Just a couple minutes to get back on stage.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. I just wanted to highlight one other area too, which I think is probably my kind of favorite component of what an LRS can do, which is beyond just the collection of the data, it's turning it into action or automation. And there are countless use cases for this, but ultimately, as statements get received in the LRS, it can then trigger other activities to occur, right? It can lead to nudges to kind of suggest, okay, you've just commented on this course. what do you think about this? Or you've completed this learning experience or curriculum or learning plan. We're going to go ahead and enroll you in the next one. Or for onboarding, great. It's day 7 or 14. We're going to check in and now feed you some other piece of content. And it's all based off of how that data comes into the platform to make it a little bit easier for you all so that those processes don't have to be manual, but you can start to rely on the application to take that effort off. And it provides a tremendous amount of efficiency through going, in an onboarding program or a compliance program, or really trying to keep people in the platform, because you have this culture shift of, it's not just about pushing out content. It's the combination of, yes, helping people get better at their roles. There's mandated training that they have to take because they work for us, but there's a lot of other resources that we're providing within our organization that we want people to have access to as well. So I wanted to just highlight a few other examples of what I've seen from some of our customers. And I think it's nice to look at what the rest of the industry is doing. And so I kind of put this map out here. And this is a workflow for a large fast food provider globally. And their focus was on really procedure training, and it tied back to compliance because how they cook their food was set in stone and it had to be replicated. And this actually leveraged Google Glasses. And based on the activities that the learner were doing through their training or onboarding, statements were received. So in this particular example, when something went wrong with the cooking of that product, it was received in the LRS. There was a message. It triggered a micro learning because there was a failed statement. It could happen again. There would then be a notification to the manager, and so on and so forth. So just a couple steps based off of what the learner is doing in their functional role that leveraged xAPI. Another one, and again, you'll have these slides to refer back to. This was really interesting. This is a very large hospitality organization, and they really wanted to focus on social learning. And this was issued to about 3,000 of their employees. But it was for the impact of MOOC and really relying more on being able to capture engagement and feedback. And they used comments and tracking responses. So this, again, had nothing to do with completion. It was all focused on the level of interaction with the content. And ultimately, as you can kind of see in the chart, throughout the course of the weeks, the volume of interaction had changed. And ultimately, there was this reflection on, based on the learning and based off of the engagement, I'm going to do something better, or I'm going to improve my habits, which result in better outcomes. So as we wrap up, just to tie it back together, again, focusing on really that story, and this is you make the data manageable and meaningful. Telling that story, if you can show ROI, that's great, but you have to be flexible and agile and realize that the information you get back is meant to be insightful and to move your business further. And so if you think back to some of those early questions that I posed at the beginning, the intent is to say, okay, well, based off of the area that we're focused on, here are some actions that we want to try to achieve. If the focus is engagement, well, we're going to design campaigns differently to capitalize on that. If the focus is content, well, let's automate content so that we don't always have to issue things and rely on people coming back into the application on its own. So I hope this was helpful. I know there's some questions. I'll go ahead and stop sharing. And Dave, you might be reading them some now as well. So let's see if we have a few minutes to address those.
All right, so I'm bringing some questions up from the Q&A. So here's one for you. Marilyn asks, how would you decide data processing protocols, making sure everything talks to one another if there isn't a system already in place in your organization?
So thanks, Marilyn. So maybe the learner record store is the answer to that. So what we see as a typical use case is exactly what you've put there. I have lots of disparate platforms that don't talk to each other, and we don't have a data processing protocol. So maybe the learner record store is the place where everything talks, and then it pushes that out. So maybe you don't decide that. Maybe the process of looking at a vendor to support you with a learner record store helps you decide that.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, I got another one for you. Alana asked, should a large organization have one LRS that compiles results from everything else? And does it matter how many different platforms a company has when it comes to adoption?
No, not at all. So we've got organizations with tens of platforms that are all pushing data. The actual volume of platforms doesn't matter. It's the volume of data that's really important. So it's really important to choose a scalable partner who's willing to start you small and then can scale with you. So what we see with our customers is that they will start with a small subscription, and as their data grows, their subscription will grow. Otherwise, you can overspend in year 1 and 2 quite heavily, or you can underspend with a non-scalable partner and end up with an ill-performing learner record store, if that makes sense.
I think the value of an LRS truly comes out as well when there are multiple sources of data, right? So that LMS plus LXP, or multiple LMSs. Honestly, I am actively speaking to global organizations that have had something in place for 10 years, and then a new business unit or a new country brought in something else, and something else was brought in. This is really common, actually, with businesses that have decentralized models where each business unit or organization brought in their own application. But it's not just the learning applications too. It's content, not LinkedIn Learning. It could be potentially performance data from the ERP. It could be something like SurveyMonkey. So the LRS and the business case for that, I think, becomes really strong as the volume of sources increases.
Awesome. Okay, so quick follow-on question, and then we need to get to cohort business.
Sure.
For simplicity's sake, do you find that your customers, I'm paraphrasing here, do you find that your customers are getting multiple instances of one company, one vendor's LRS, or if they have multiple LRSs, are they mixing and matching, or can they mix and match vendors?
So you can mix and match vendors, absolutely. That's the beauty of having the standard. Whether it's cost effective to do that, I'm not sure. But we see larger organizations have proof of concepts with multiple vendors, and then they pick the one that gets them to value more quickly. But there is absolutely no harm. The nature of xAPI makes it absolutely possible to have as many as you like.
Marilyn, I don't think that's the intent, though, to have multiple LRS applications.
Awesome. And then there's one more question in the Q&A, and it's actually one that everybody can jump into. It's more of a cohort question than an LRS question. There's an LRS answer to it, and then there's a statement design answer to it. So I'm going to let everybody take that question in the main chat. And hey, Ryan, Dave, thank you. Thank you for joining Cohort. Thank you for spending the time. Thank you for really addressing a need that we have seen people have. You can tell by the quality of the questions and the nature of things that we're digging in that this is a space that is really interesting to people. So thank you so much. I appreciate it, and hope to see you in the chat and in the Slack conversation as well.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for the time, guys. Great to meet you all.
That was so cool. So I love having the opportunity to see examples, to pick the brains of experts, and to really have have a rich and robust conversation about this. So speaking of rich and robust conversation, let's get some team updates. So teams, it is still okay to form teams. We have some new teams this week. But now we're in the team status updates. Look at all these teams. This is exciting. This is really exciting. Teams, take a quick look. This is the order in which we are going to do your demos this week. And because I am working on a single monitor in advance of a snowstorm, I'm working from home today. So I cannot see who else is on stage. So when you come on stage, just shout it out and let me know. Or maybe I'll flip back and forth. This will be interesting, Jamie. We'll figure it out. In order to, if your channel browser in Slack doesn't look like this and you're like, how do I find the teams? Go ahead. If you hover over the channels, there's a button. You can click Browse Channels, and you're looking for things that start with team. That's our current set of teams. We're going to go in alphabetical order. Ethan, are you there? Actually, I don't think Ethan.
Hello.
Hey, there you are. Okay.
Yes, I am here. Anyway, yeah, so.
Awesome. Ethan, the 1 minute update. What are you guys doing?
All right. So this week we are having our meeting on a different day. We will be having it today at from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. And next week we will, however, don't scratch that time just yet, because that will be the next meeting we will have, which will be on Monday from 4:30 to 6 o'clock. Not the 20. We will be having our next meeting on the. Okay, so our next meeting is today at 5 o'clock. And then after that, we will have a meeting on the 21st from 4:30 to 6 o'clock. However, today we'll have a meeting from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And so we're currently still looking through the project, coming up with project ideas. So if you have any, feel free to join us tonight. And we are also preparing a list of resources to help onboard people. Thanks for your time. That is all.
Awesome. Awesome. So this is a team that started up last semester and is in progress this semester and doing some very cool stuff. Gabby, are you out there for an update from Team Data Analytics? Jamie, I wondered if you could let me know, are we bringing, and because I can't see, are we bringing Gabby on stage? Gabby's on stage.
Yay, I'm here. And I'll turn my camera on. Yay, hi.
Hey.
So I'm just going to paraphrase mostly what's on the slide here, but we met last week. It's a small but mighty group of very talented people, not so much myself, but the rest of my team. And we're looking at building kind of a high-level view of a program with learner goals, assessments, scenarios, and just trying to figure out, once we have the data, how to tell a story with that xAPI data that's meaningful, that we can potentially use to drive change within an organization. So this week, Amy and Kristen put together kind of a storyboard of different experiences that we could create. And next, what we have to do is set up our LRS and figure out a way, if anybody has any tips, to create bulk data so that we can use that data to mock up analytics platform.
Gabby, I'm going to have you, you might get some takers here, and you can put that out on the, I would recommend you put that out in the main channel, that request. I think you'll get some data.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Very cool. Thanks, Gabby. Good to have you on Cohort. I did not get an update from Team Former Teachers, but I did from Team H5P. Well, a quick update. It's not an official update, but there is definitely things going on, and looking at different kinds of content types, including H5P, which is a funky open source operating or authoring environment. So very, very cool stuff there. Team Free Code Camp, I believe, also does not have an updater this week. But they are getting rolling. They are learning about each other and the Free Code Camp platform itself. Next, looking at ways to figure out where to actually update or where to actually trigger xAPI statements. And then they may need a little bit of support reading source code. So if you know anything about React, xAPI, Node.js, Loopback, or Express, that is a team that will be interested in hearing from you. And they've got a meeting tomorrow if you are interested in joining them live. Super, super cool stuff. Nicholas, are you there? I realize it might be a really, really horrible hour of the morning for you. Or Jamie, let me know if Nicholas is not joining us. Nope. Okay. Moving right along, I believe. So, Team More Than Score, Mary Elizabeth, I see you out there. Got an update for us?
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah. Let me flip on my camera. So we meet Thursday mornings. So this update is fresh off the press. Thanks, Megan, for grabbing it. So we are really wanting to take a storyline file that we would normally just publish as SCORM and see what we can get out of it with xAPI. And we figured out that we kind of have 3 different areas of interest. That one group that wants to get behavior information from simulations, in particular in Storyline. Another group that wants to get item level information from quiz questions in Storyline. And then we have another group who is really interested in what happens after all of that. So looking at what that looks like in the LRS and helping us to kind of test the SCORM file. We're probably going to use SCORM Cloud, it sounds like, to see what we're getting before we put it into the LRS. So a lot of this is just kind of proof of concept to see what we can do with xAPI. And we have some goals for this week to make some forward progress with that in creating a storyline file and getting our watershed account up and running so that we have the place to point everything. And that is where we're at. And you're still welcome to join. The link to the weekly team meeting, which is Thursday mornings, is in our Slack channel.
Awesome. Thanks. I love xAPI in e-learning because it is a great point of entry, and I love e-learning xAPI that is more than what we're getting out of SCORM. So very, very cool. Colin Hayes, are you there to give us an update on team non-traditional data sources?
Hey there, can you hear me?
I sure can. Welcome.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Pretty small update this week. We're continuing to research and working on adding content to the PowerPoint that I referenced in last week's update. As you see right here, it looks like a multiple projects in parallel sort of effort. I just want to reiterate a call to the broader group. Whether you're new to this, very familiar with it, or quite advanced at utilizing xAPI, this is a crowdsourced effort. So even if you just want to pick a single question out of the 4 that we have in the PowerPoint, post some information about it in the channel. If you're experienced and you think you have something to add that might help us out as newcomers, please, I encourage everybody, come check out the channel, come post something. Anything that gets added in the channel will get added to the PowerPoint once it's posted. And then I imagine the next couple of weeks, a week or two, we will try and organize a meeting of some sort to kind of discuss and debrief. But for now, it's everybody working at their own pace independently.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That's kind of cool. And we have a number of these parallel play projects going on. So that is including Storyline Beginner Bring Your Own, which tends to be a parallel play project too also. So I think that's a really cool way of learning. The instructional designer in me is pretty geeked out for that.
Thanks.
So thanks, Con. Shauna, are you there for an update for Team Unreal Engine?
Hi, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. What's going on?
Not too much. We've met once so far, and we actually had a really great meeting. We decided we had a lot of questions because we didn't. There was three of us who attended that we didn't really fully understand how to connect xAPI. And then we had a member join, Ryan, and he was highly informative and helped us kind of set a lot of stuff up. And so we have stuff set up already for the xAPI. But the next part of what we're doing is we've decided to start a mini project that will use the character to just take some simple information in for our first iteration. And then when we get the statements, to analyze them and to look at different ways that we can design some metrics around just very simple statements of like the buttons the user clicks and whether the they have a choice of picking either a red pill or a blue pill, kind of like the Matrix.
I love it.
And then we're just gonna, so that's basically where we're just gonna start. And then after that, we're gonna, every week we're going to, I think we're more a group that's based on asking questions about our learning process. So every week we'll revisit the new questions that we'll have new questions about what we've done and kind of let the learning follow in that way.
Coolness. Awesome. Well, thanks, Shauna.
Thanks,
Shauna. All right. Mark, are you able to join us on stage for an update from Team xAPI Developer Tools? I know we're running a little bit over, everybody, so we'll keep our updates short and make sure that everybody gets the recording afterwards.
Hi, Megan. How are things?
Mark, you're really, really quiet. So rather than trying to troubleshoot, just shout it out.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
It's better. Keep shouting.
Okay, great. Started this team last Thursday, and we are now 13 members strong. And the intent here is to explore the missing developer tools ecosystem that I've experienced. So I've been digging into the xAPI and CMI5 specifications to see what we can do. Very close to producing a beta for a Visual Studio Code extension that I've been working on, and I'd like to share that with the team. So we're just getting the GitHub set up, doing all those things to get the team on the go. And I've just been welcoming team members since Thursday and just talking about how we can begin to collaborate on some of these cool tools we want to build.
That is so awesome. So awesome. Well, thank you. And I love it whenever we're building tools that the community can use. So awesome. Hey, thanks, everybody. Super great work. Lots of cool things going on in the cohort Slack. Follow the xAPI Gnome for reminders, updates, and interesting information. And get out there and make something cool. Have a fantastic week, everybody. It's good to see you here on Cohort, and see you next week.